Hello everybody, Zelfie here, and today I wanted to go over basically a tier list of what I predict the Lost Origin metagame to be like over these past week or so. I've been playtesting a lot of these decks myself, and then ever since Lost Abyss released in Japan, I've been watching tournaments, gameplay, looking at deck list, and sort of seeing where their metagame is heading so I could try to get some informed opinions before the actual set comes out. So yeah, this is basically a culmination of everything that I've seen so far, and I hope this serves two purposes. The first purpose is one, I hope that I'm correct. If not, I hope to be able to look back on this and sort of judge where I was right, where I was wrong, and try to use it to further my own metagame predictions in the future. And two is if there's some people out there that are looking to test out new decks or trying to figure out what to build for the next metagame, hopefully this should serve as a useful base for that. With that said, let's just go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to start from the bottom to top. So Zacian is a deck that I've seen a lot of people play in JP. They play it extremely similarly to Diogo. Basically what Zacian does, it would be here. 3 colorless, you got a 200 damage attack that, is able to bypass checks such as Duraludon. Not that I think you're going to be playing special energy, but most notably, it bypasses Tank, which is neat. And then you got a V-Star, which can just go ahead and knock out a Pokemon for free. Essentially, right? So that's about all I can say about Zacian. You do have Zacian V, who is a really good starter, and being able to promote into just another attacker can serve you extremely well. What I've just found is that the deck is just underwhelming, at least comparatively Diogo, who is a deck that I respect quite a bit. Zacian just doesn't have the same firepower, and you can tune it to run more firepower. You run cards like Rusted Sword Leon, Galarian Berserker, but ultimately I just think it's too much setup for not enough reward. I have Kyurem right here. I think Kyurem's actually a pretty good deck. Where'd I put it? I think Kyurem's actually a pretty good deck. But I don't think you can play this deck without the Palkia, and that is my current stance on it. I'll talk a little bit more about Kyurem when we start getting to tier 1 stuff. But yeah, Kyurem itself just I don't think is functional with an Inteleon engine. You really have to be running it with a certain different engine. So that one's off the table. I heavily dislike Blue Rock. Blue Rock is probably one of my most disliked decks of the previous set. I don't think it has the great tools. It's super linear. And with Arc Pika winning Worlds, there will definitely be a surgence of people trying out Arceus Pikachu and probably sticking with it because the deck is super good, and that only means bad things for Little Rock. In terms of other things that come out in this set, there is a few new Last Sun cards that put a damper on Little Rock's plans. The Sableye could end up taking multiple Pokemon out at the same time. Caravax is annoying. And then some of these Lost Toolbox decks are also playing cards like Amazing Raikou, for example, right? I just don't think that the metagame in the future is going to benefit Little Rock. I think it goes down further. Arceus Giratina is probably the evolution of the Arceus plus Big Attacker, except instead of Duraludon, we have Giratina. I actually am not a huge fan of this deck list after playing it out. You sort of throw away some of the high roll potential that Giratina could have using cards like Comfy and Cramorant, and basically foregoing the chance of you getting a turn 2 attack. Getting a turn 2 attack is, I wouldn't say unlikely, it's just a little uncommon. You could high roll a turn 2 attack Giratina, otherwise you're more likely to get a turn 3 unless you're bricking. Arceus Giratina pretty much concedes the fact that it will never use Giratina's attack by turn 2, and that you'll be attacking by turn 3. But at that point, I feel like there's stronger contenders. We've seen Arc Duraludon work, and there are tools inside of Arc Duraludon to make sure Duraludon can't get the KOs. So ultimately, I just think that, you either just commit to Giratina or you play Arc Duraludon. Regigigas is a deck that I think falls off even harder. It has a almost decent matchup into Arc Pika, except for the fact that when Pika attacks, I think it just blocks all basic damage done to it, as opposed to like stopping the opposing. I need to like double check this. So TCG player, Fly Pikachu, VMAX. I just have to like double check this, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, you prevent all damage. So, you know, Regigigas doesn't have a lot of phenomenal matchups. Your matchups against Hisuian Zoroark are okay due to Regirock. Your matchup against Kira VMAX will be fine because of, you know, Regigigas itself. But ultimately, I think the future metagame that we are going to be heading into does not benefit Regigigas. We have Glaring Weezing. Glaring Weezing is still just too slow on its own. Maybe you can make this work with some other Pokemon, but ultimately, I don't think Sneasler changes the way the deck is played. Just for context, we have a new Sneasler here, which puts 2 more damage counters on the opposing opponent's Pokemon during checkup. So that was like the idea, right? Like, oh, you make your ticks, you basically get 40 more damage in between turns, right? But it's still too slow. You can run Glaring Weezing with other Pokemon, like probably an Aqua Bolt, like with Inteleon and Radiazard, possibly. You play it like how you were playing it in Fusion Strike, but people in Fusion Strike learned how to play around this deck, and I just simply don't think it's that good anymore. Darkrai is a deck that everyone wants to believe is super good, but ultimately it just sort of really isn't. The deck has a lot of issues, and I wouldn't even recommend the Turbo version. I think the Turbo version of Darkrai is extremely mediocre. You're better off going with the Glaring Weezing one so you can start building up attackers, and eventually you can overcome some of these bigger hurdles in the metagame. But still, you know, I want to play Turbo Darkrai. If anything, I'll give like Darkrai Weezing a mention in Tier 3. I don't think it'll ever win anything or like impress people, but people like Darkrai, so, you know, hard to say. In the I'm unsure category, there are decks that I haven't tested enough to know whether or not they're good. Zeraora has been on my testing list right now, and we're not even sure if we're going to get Zeraora, to be fair. But, you know, you've got this new one, it does 190 damage. You can put a Choice Bell, Oko, or Arceus, and you're fine. If you manage to get 3 Energy Cell by that point with like Mirage Gate or Dynamotor or something like that. The VMAX has decent damage output as well, on top of being a VMAX, so, you know, pretty bulky, can do a lot of damage, yada yada. And then we get the V-Star here, which has another, like, high power attack. Once again, you shove a Choice Bell on, you can Oko V, and then a very interesting V-Star. That is 60 spread in a lot of places. If you're playing this in a Lost Zone deck with the Lost Zone engine, you get access to Sableye, and Sableye is able to bypass Manaphy and knock out Manaphy's, which makes it easier for you to trigger your actual V-Star attack. So that's one benefit going for it. On top of that, you're a lightning type attacker in a format where Palkia is the best deck in the format. So, you know, that's just another plus side, because regardless, you can Oko Palkia if you need to. Ultimately, you just haven't had enough testing to say. I would probably say it's around the Tier 3 area. I don't think it's that great, but, you know, maybe I'm wrong. We have Aerodactyl V-Star. This is a card I didn't think was super great at first, but there's a few things going for it. I think there's a little bit of room for testing. So, the main attraction here, like the thing that people look at the most, is the Ancient Star attack, which basically puts a one-sided path into peak in play when you have this. So that's good. The biggest benefits out of this is that they can't bump it, and you can play another stadium alongside this. So you can play a stadium like Temple of Sinnoh, for example. Maybe you're a bit cheekier and you want to play Galvantine. On top of that, we don't know when we are getting this card right here, but Kevin Poncho says if the card this is attached to is a V-Star or V-Max, it can't be bossed up. So, you know, you have another way to protect the Aerodactyl after you set it up. The other interesting thing about this is that This is probably one of the fastest ways to get cards into your Lost Zone, like in general, between like a fighting and a double turbo energy. You know, you can run this alongside a comfy engine as well, and then you can reach a threshold where you get to use Fantina. And Fantina is pretty good, so maybe you just like, in certain matchups, you'll use the Aerodactyl, but most of the time you're just like rushing out to get to Fantina. You're a fighting type, so you hit Arceus for weakness. It is a little unfortunate your HP doesn't even reach 270, so you are quick to be knocked out. But I still think there's some room for experimentation with this card that we just aren't seeing. Maybe someone could break Aerodactyl, but you know, I'm gonna leave it here. Potentially, this deck will never be more than Rogue, I believe, unless if some mainstream like victory happens with it. But if the deck can just wall people out, I'd probably rank it somewhere in this like middle higher tier 2 area. I think the deck has potential. I just have not experimented enough to see it. And we got the Lost Zone Urshifu decks. This has the same premises as like a Zeraora Lost Box deck, where you have Sableye, which can work around Manaphy and some spread damage in places, and you can use Mirage Gate, which is, I haven't been able to talk about all these cards yet, but the main attraction of Lost Zone is that when you get 7 cards into the Lost Zone, you get to use this Mirage Gate and attach 2 basic energies of different types of your Pokemon. So you just attach like a Water Energy and a Fighting Energy to your Urshifu, for example. Possibly you run in some other tech attackers as well, or you just like, you know, run Melody, Mirage Gate, and stuff like that. Your other cards that are important are the Comfy, which is the amazing Jirachi ability, but you put one of the cards in the Lost Zone and set it back on top of the deck. You have Colress's Experiment. Look at the top 5 cards in your deck, you pick 3, put 2 into the Lost Zone, and then you also have Cramorant as like a supplementary attacker. And those are like the 4 main cards you need to know about the like Lost Zone engine as a whole. You basically just like scoop up that with a bunch of Comfies, use Colress, and then Mirage Gate to your attacker choice. Spread has been shown to be extremely prevalent, even in formats with Manaphy and Mew, with like basically the exception of Astral Radiance. Urshifu has come out and dominated each and every one of those minigames. Even in Fusion Strike, when Mew was super popular, there were still creeping Urshifu wins around the corner. So, you know, I don't want to diss the deck. I will never sleep on Urshifu at this point. But also, I just don't have enough testing with the Lost Box version to say if it would be good or not. Tier 3 are some decks that I think are more fringe. Like, if you have these decks, you could probably play them and you'll probably do fine. But I'm not too sure. Lost Bullet can probably go up here. But these other 3 are very fringe. Basically, the Inteleon box deck that I was talking about, with like the Galarian Weezing and stuff like that, you run Weezings, or you just run tech attackers, use like Rhyhorns and cheap attacks that power up your Pokemon and get some swings. This deck can do fine. I just think it is a very high skill deck with very low reward. On top of that, there's just going to be some scenarios that are going to be incredibly difficult for you, such as in the upcoming format, there's going to be an even bigger emphasis on hitting 280 and cards that allow you to mitigate damage via Radiant Gardevoir, Fantina, and the Stadium as well, Lake Acuity. So I might as well bring all of those up. So we got Radiant Gardevoir here, 20 less damage from V's. I guess it doesn't really affect Inteleon box that I think about that, but still a consideration. The other big one that I was thinking of was Lake Acuity. So if you have a water or fighting energy attached, you take 20 less damage. On top of that, some of these decks might just be running more cards like Tool Jammer and Big Charm in order to help decrease some of the damage coming in. So I don't think Inteleon box is gonna see a lot of success in the format. And Bliss Tank is also a deck I'm not very too fond of. With, you know, the Arceus Pikachu lists that have Decidueye winning Worlds, I think it becomes harder for this deck to survive. Of course, you're still going to have good matchups against the Palkia Ice Rider or Palkia Kyurem list. I think Bliss Tank can do very well against. On top of that, there's still a few other attackers in this game, like the Zoroark, for example, that you will have a good time with. But, you know, you're still going to have a lot of struggles. Giratina has a Shred attack, which allows it to get past Miltank. It also has a V-Star that can instantly knock out Blissey. Just a few things coming into metagame that I think make Blissey's chances even worse. Still, you have a decent matchup in the Palkia, and you are a deck that can just do well sometimes. Rogue decks, I think, are decks that will probably be slept on. I think these decks can perform well, but simply put, I don't think enough people will play them to, validate their rankings anywhere. Zoroark is probably the most likely of these decks to be played, just because people really like the idea of trying to use Slowbro to win games. The deck has a lot of tools, a lot of ways you can build it, and I don't think most people have found the correct way of playing Zoroark. I also think, personally, putting my opinion out there, more people need to take advantage of all of the draw engines that you have available. This means make dues, this means trade, this means Barrel, this means Radiant Venusaur, and then top that all off with Grant. I think Wormadam is a great neutral attacker, just because we have so many ways of also buffing up its attack between Choice Bell and Grant. Make it worthwhile. We have Mewtwo V-Star, or not V-Star, yeah, V-Star. Basically, I just think this mod is, decent. This is the most, average tier 2 attacker in the game. A lot of people weren't playing it. I was surprised that I didn't see a little more testing. The deck is overall fine, and it's gonna win matches, but it's about the most fair a deck gets in this game, while also needing a little tiny bit of juice. Ultimately, I think that the best version of Mewtwo V-Star will probably be the Shadow Rider version, just because you have the great alternate attacker and the draw engine on top of your ramp engine. We have seen some versions try to play Lunatone Solrock, and we have an upcoming Clefairy in the set that can also ramp energy out quickly. So, you know, it's possible maybe there's a Clefairy Shadow Rider deck, and I didn't get to test that all too much, nor did I see any of that. But I think Mewtwo is just fine. And once again, we do have this Camo Poncho item that helps to protect your Shadow Riders as well. On top of that, this is sort of a, side grade buff, but we have this new Drapion coming out, not the V-Star, but the V, that has this Wild Style attack. This is basically a Mew counterattack, and so it does encourage some decks that lose the Mew to drop any Moltres Moltres cards they're running and run the Drapion instead, which is good because this puts less emphasis on attacking Psychic types in general and more emphasis on attacking Mew. So this is a almost indirect buff to any Shadow Rider deck, in my opinion. We got the Mewtwo V-Unity, and despite this being the third most popular deck at Worlds, I do believe this deck is going to fall off. I think the new Toy Syndrome will wear off. It's lasted quite a bit for this set, and I think the deck is fine, but I think this deck will find I think sorry, I need to put my mind into my words. I think that a lot of people will drop the deck because it's less exciting now. And you do gain a few harder matchups. Palkia Kyurem can find ways to Oko this, where Palkia Ice Rider would have a harder time trying to find an Oko versus the V-Unity. And then we also got the Giratina, which is just another card who can knock out the Mewtwo with no problems whatsoever. So, hard to say, because I think Mewtwo V-Unity is probably going to get worse. There's an argument to be made that with the new metagame trends upcoming, it probably falls more down to here. But, you know, it's still a fine deck. It's going to perform well against the other Palkia variants. It's probably going to perform well against Arctura, or not Arctura, Arcpika. So, you know, hard to say. Inteleon is another pet deck of mine. I think that this deck still has a lot of great tools to it. There's two ways to really play it. You can play the more controlling version, just max Path of the Peaks and Cheryls and Palpads, and you just basically deal 170 a turn with your choice belt and knock them out. This deck is going to be forced to run another tool in its arsenal in the big Paracel in order to avoid getting knocked out by the Aerodactyl V-Star, but you could possibly force them to take out 2 V-Maxes instead. So yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room in that matchup for both players to win, as long as the Inteleon deck is built correctly, but I also don't think players will build Inteleon correctly. I think it'll be like a few casual people who've been playing the deck for a while, playing their old versions, right? So I don't expect to see people playing Inteleon and making it shine, just like the other decks in Red, where I think they're in this middle tier 2 category for the most part, but I don't think people will play them. The other version is a combo version using cards like Radiant Blastoise and the Inteleon's ability itself in Double Gunner, and trying to set Yoga Loops that take extra turns and get extra damage all over the place. I think that version is also fine, but once again, I don't think anyone's going to come out with a list that is going to raise its popularity enough to sort of validate its own placement in tier 2, so go leave it alone. We have a side variation on this deck up here, where we take out the Pikachu for the Magnezone instead. Magnezone is a new V-Star that we are getting in the upcoming set. That has a pretty similar attack, at least in terms of cost, and 180 damage for you to search your deck for 2 item cards and put them into your hand. On top of that, you're a V-Star, so you're a 2-prizer instead of a 3-prizer. This has both ups and downsides, because in the mirror, that means Magnezone trades pretty fairly into Pikachu VMAX, but you in turn are going to lose to Decidueye more, which, is kind of hard because your deck doesn't have a great answer to Decidueye, unless if you're running a Dunsparce. I think that this attacker is sometimes generally better, where Pikachu can lock decks out completely, and that is really the big side, so yeah. Really hard to say if this deck will pop off or not. The idea is there, but once again, I don't think it'll really, be super popular. I think that this deck is still marginally worse than this, because being able to shut down explicit matchups with Flying Pika is still really good, even if I think Magnezone is a better general attacker. We got 2 more, they're almost meme decks. We got Decidueye here. Decidueye is what I would classify as a high effort, high reward deck. You get to basically use a Ringaroo to set Gutsy Pickaxes, you charge a bunch of energy, and then, because you can discard up to 3 energy to your hand, Decidueye will hit 250 damage, and then you can combine this with Choice Belt or Grant. So, as long as you have 4 of the 5 conditions met, you can OHKO a V-Star. If that is a tough sell, I know it is, but, personally just played this deck myself, and seeing that it is very possible for you to get these turn 2 attacks off, where you're able to just pop off with your damage, take a lead, and then not even have to set up a huge bench that Palkia can very easily OHKO you without text, right? You just have a lot of great ways of drawing 2. Your V-Star draws you up to 8 cards. You've got Baneros, you got Ringaroos, you got Gutsy Pickaxes. The deck draws through a lot of cards on its initial pop-off turn. So I think the deck is pretty solid. It also has Pierce too, which is something that, other V decks don't have to worry, other V decks have to worry about. So the deck is fine. The deck is probably, it probably states around Arctura tier or something like that, right? And then we got Graded. Graded is a new card coming out in this set. It's weird to call this a low effort attacker because people immediately look at the cost. Discard your hand if you did. If you discard 5 or more cards, you get to do 210 damage. So this is actually a fairly easy attacker to use. All you have to do is get your energy out there, and then end your turn by playing Marty or Barbarrel, and then dump in your hand. So, dumping in your hand seems pretty bad. but you know, you have ways of drawing that cards, and because your deck actually requires so little, you are basically only required to run ordinary rods, the barrels, gradeds, and cards that search out those cards, and the 8 energies, of course. The rest of your deck can basically be whatever else you want to run, and so this gives you room to run disruptive cards like Path to the Peak and Marty and Judge, and cards like that can help to just slow the opponent down phenomenally. It slows down their game plans, makes them like lose all semblance of strategy they could have done. Palkias usually win by having pretty big hands against you, and being able to use his tools to find damage where they need to. And just when you're constantly slowing down Path to the Peak or Marty Judge against your opponent, you aren't able to do much. So, you know, it seems a little gimmicky, but just hear me out that I think this deck is actually pretty strong. Probably the strongest single prize archetype we are getting out of this set. The decks all above are all decks I think will see some usage and some popularity, and be able to find success in the metagame. Whether this is just the game top 8 or winning a tournament, it's up to you. We have Hisuian Zork. This is probably like the deck that's like closest to the tier 3 category. It basically uses the new Gengar, which, you know, once it's in the discard area, you can put it onto your bench and put damage onto it. Then you can play this damage pump to move the damage around to your other Pokemon. And finally, the Zoroark itself is important because it does 50 damage for each of the Pokemon that are damaged. So if you have a full bench of damaged Pokemon and a double Turbo Energy attached, that means you will be doing 280 damage, right? That's that benchmark I was talking about. That was like, you know, that's the decidueye benchmark I was talking about. That was the Mewtwo benchmark I was talking about. You need to hit. That's the Giratina benchmark. That's basically where all the V-Stars are at right now, right? So it does pretty respectable damage. You do have to watch out just a little bit for cards like Avery, which can slow down your process, or just simply not getting enough Pokemon down in time. You have another stadium in the form of Geetjaw Bog, which helps to put damage counters all places, which means that you can't mess around with, you know, how much damage you need to get a KO in the first place. Like if it's not a Palkia or Arceus V-Star, they'll more than likely have 270 or 260 HP, and so you can get away with just having 5 damage Pokemon, or just, you know, have 5 damage Pokemon in Choice Belt. There's a lot of ways to find your damage in this deck, albeit less by your own decisions and more by the state of the game. On top of that, you have a pretty decent V-Star power that just helps you churn through your deck faster. There's also going to be some... Oh, right. The other card I want to talk about is that in the Japanese list, you'll be seeing a lot of... this card right here. They use a Melody engine just so they have extra ways of attacking that don't require the double Turbo Energy, and that means that they've also had the ability to play Empoleon V. This is pretty good into the upcoming format, where we expect to see a lot of Lost Zone engines in the first place. The Empoleon turns off all the non-rule box basic Pokemon, so basically it turns off Comfey and Cramorant. Those are the big two. Of course, you'll also see some other decks on here that rely on basic Pokemon. You could get past Miltanks, of course. That's always important. You can turn off Celebration's Mew. This is probably the card that you're least excited to be hitting, but, you know, it's still fine. You can turn off Littlerock, Regigigas, and you don't see the Oranguru on here, but the Kyurem list are definitely playing Oranguru. Same with the Decidueye, you know. So you actually turn off quite a lot of abilities into the upcoming format, where a lot of these basic ability Pokemon are actually going to start to shine. So, you know, just saying that the Empoleon is probably going to be pretty strong, and Hisuian Zork is one of those decks that can afford to run it. So I think it's pretty well positioned to the next metagame. It's not shattering or anything, or cheating, but it'll do just fine. Dewgong is our most latest single prize attacker, and probably the single prize attacker that'll get the most hype in the upcoming set. We got this attack right here, which is basically just the Rapid Strike Malamar attack, but with water energies on the field instead of Rapid Strike cards in the hand. And then we got this new Finneon here, which just allows you to attach as many water energies as you want to your Swim Freely Pokemon. So you get to make use of putting the cards down first and then join afterwards. Rapid Strike Malamar has this problem where basically, you can put down Pokemon and attach energy, but besides that, you always have to play Cynthia's Ambition pretty early into the turn, where with Dewgong, you can play out a lot of cards that search out energy specifically, or other Pokemon, put them down, and then, maybe draw like a barrel once, and then put down, whatever energy cards you draw there, and then Cynthia's afterwards and get those energies on. So ultimately, I think that your ability to churn through the deck is a lot better in Dewgong than Rapid Strike Malamar ever had. I think that's almost enough to put it back on the radar. There's still a few things to struggle with, like 2 prize Pokemon are annoying in case you can't get those KOs, but the deck building is less restrictive, which means you get to run a lot more actually good cards that help search through your deck that you just don't immediately have to put back in there. And you have a lot of draw power as well. There's a few cards that help out Dewgong a lot. Cynthia's Ambition and Bibarel are the 2 big ones, but you can also run the Evolving Skies Eldegoss. The Evolving Skies Eldegoss searches your deck for 2 energies and puts them into your hand, so just a once per turn Capacious Bucket or Professor's Letter, whatever you want to call it. The other card that you could possibly use is Zoroark. Because your entire list is it around here? Because your entire list is stage 1s, you can use Zoroark to just basically say, hey, I lost, where the hell is it? It's right here. You can just say, hey, I lost Eldegoss, or maybe, they bossed up my Bibarel, right? Now what do? You just Phantom Transformation to the card you lost. Or they killed the Dewgong, you just transform it to the Dewgong. So you can use it to create more stable boards. There's a lot of experimentation I think could be done with Dewgong, like what types of supporters you're running. Are you running more of the ladies that search out 4 energies, or Cynthia's Ambition? But still, I think that this is probably the single prize deck that will get the most hype into the upcoming set. Some YouTuber will probably be like, is this the new best single prizer? And then Dewgong will be extremely popular because of it, right? We got Kramer right here, and the deck has a lot of tools. As I was talking about before, use Comfy, Colress Experiment, and Kramer to basically get free damage off. But this is using more of the basic Pokemon as well. So sometimes you can charge up Radiant Charizard, which does 250. A lot of JP lists run this Snorlax. It's a basic Pokemon that does a lot of damage. So yeah, you just ignore all the other text on the card, and you just read this as, hey, manual attach Mirage Gate for 180 damage. The big card that you get for playing basics is that you get the same life, which can put damage counters on Pokemon. Let's just say they have 2 Sobbles on the field, for example, right? You can KO both the Sobbles if you have 10 cards in the lost end. So that's like really it. You're like the Inteleon box deck, except you have a lot more firepower built into your Pokemon than you do with that deck. You have less direct search power, which sucks, but I think the trade-off in actually being able to find your KOs faster in Kramer makes this the better toolboxy deck compared to Inteleon Charizard. Finally, we're getting on to a lot of the V-Star decks and V-Max decks that I think will continue to strive in the format. We got Art Duraludon. Basically, he's been doing the same thing it's been doing ever since it came out. You just charge it up with Arceus, plow through people. Sometimes you're gonna checkmate certain decks with your ability on the Duraludon. For example, Zoroark has to find a way around this. Mew has to max Miracle, or once again, find another way around it. Just a few things that are stopped by Duraludon's ability. And you also ignore Miltank and any effects on Pokemon thanks to your G-Max Polarization. Recently, more people have been throwing in damage cards like Karen's Conviction and Choice Belt, in order to allow Duraludon to hit that 280 benchmark. So I think this deck is probably the best form it's been in for a while. Really finding that extra damage has made me respect this deck a whole lot more. And I just need to double check something too. So let's look up Duraludon VMAX. Right here. So you ignore any effects on your opposing opponent's Pokemon. There is a card I haven't been able to talk about yet from the Lost Archetype, and that's Fantina. Oh, we talked about with Aerodactyl. But yeah, basically G-Max Pulverization goes through Aerodactyl, or Fantina, which is a really powerful buff in the upcoming set. I can even see an argument for this deck even possibly being up here, but I do think it will struggle against primarily these two variants of Palkia, the Palkia variants of the alternate VMAX attacker. But I think the deck is super strong. I think if I were to recommend a almost easy deck to use, I'd recommend this deck. I think it's super strong and well positioned in the metagame. Diogo V Star is... I would say Diogo V Star and Giratina are pretty close cousins in terms of what they want to do. They both have, this engine where they're shuffling around Pokemon and trying to get themselves set up, and then they have this huge pop-off turn where they basically cheat. With Dialga, it uses Star Chronos, does a bunch of damage, takes an extra turn, and gets into the range where it can start OHKOing other Pokemon. And then Giratina, it reaches this game state where Giratina can charge itself up immediately and start OHKOing anything. So these two decks play very, very similarly. Dialga, I think, is decently well positioned, especially because it does pretty well into the majority of decks. I don't know what Dialga explicitly loses to as well, besides... I can't really say. It probably just toe-to-toes with everything. Doesn't exactly have the best chances of winning, because sometimes you do need to high roll your victories. You're not always gonna turn 2 Star Chronos, for example, right? But still, the deck is strong. Same thing with Giratina. Giratina will sometimes have this pop-off turn where you get to use your attack for... I think this is the first time I'm looking at Giratina on here, so we'll just go ahead and pull it up. Giratina does 280, but you need a Grass, Psychic, and Colorless energy, and then you have to put 2 energies attached to it into your Lost Zone. So, very strong attacker, and then you have Star Requiem, which can immediately knock out something. Really good for some of the tankier Pokemon like the V-Union and the Inteleon, stuff like that, right? I think Giratina does at least force the metagame to adapt around it, because unchecked, Giratina will pop off, and Giratina will destroy a lot of people. But I think Giratina is actually one of the easiest top decks we've had to tech against for a while. I've already talked about quite a few. We've got the Big Parasol. I have to pull this up because I don't think anyone remembers what this card is. We get the Dark Parasol, at least for now. That stops Star Requiem from actually working. We have the Empoleon that I was talking about earlier, which turns off your whole early game engine. And there's, like I said, there's just quite a few things that you can do against against Giratina to tech against it. I think that's what holds it back from being the real tier 1 deck. But, expect people to pop off with this. I expect this deck to win something. We got Mewtwo VMAX. This deck is still extremely solid. It got top 8 at Worlds, not like the super impressive finish of, winning Worlds, for example, but Mew's still strong. You're gonna have a lot of donk options against people that can't set it properly. I think the deck is worse at higher level, but really good at lower level. Simply put, people don't know how to play around losing their Pokemon going first. So they'll go first and they'll be like, oh, there's no way they can charge up and attack me, and then mellow it and blows them up, right? So, Mew VMAX is still incredibly strong. You've got the fake Sharon's Care, where you psychically leap back into the deck. You are susceptible to techs as well. There's that new Drapion I was talking about that some decks will play. There's Path to the Peak as always. Not sure what decks are running Temple of Sinnoh, but that's still another card to worry about. Just a few things that throw a wrench in Mew's plans. On top of that, Mew is a 3-prizer, so if a Mew does get knocked out, it is worth more than knocking out a Palkia, for example. I think Ice Rider is still very well positioned in this metagame. I've talked about this a lot with my like inner friend groups and stuff like that. But Ice Rider is just incredibly strong. 280 is the number to hit. We're going to most of the time trade 2 V-Stars for an Ice Rider. Just simply put, most of these V-Stars can't break past it. So yeah, Ice Rider's good. It does 280 damage with the choice belt attached. Even if you wanted to hit VMAX numbers too, you could start ready cards like Leon or ready Halucha to increase your damage even further. I was also, I mean, if you look down here, there's an Ice Rider Frostlass version. I wouldn't recommend that, unless if you're like really budget. If you want to play like some deck where you get to use supporters like Cheryl or Leon alongside, instead of having to play Melody every turn, you just play the Palkia version instead. Arc Intel is weird to put into tier 2 because before, most people's tier list will look like this. Ignore this tier in the middle. Everyone's tier list will look like this, where they're like, Arc Intel and Palkia are the best decks in the format. But realistically, what I've just seen from the current metagame is that Arceus Inteleon just does not have a super favorable matchup spread. It loses to Palkia because they have to actually play cards, and that allows Palkia to ramp up the damage and find the KOs against the Arceus V-Star, where, you know, Arceus can't really find the kills itself against the Palkia. And then against the Arc Pika, well, they've thrown in the Decidueye now, so you gotta put Dunsparce back into your deck, or, you know, suffer the consequences. So I don't think that this deck is very well positioned. I also think it's partially too slow, especially with Giratina coming into the format. I was talking about how you can tech against Giratina, but still, if you're a slow deck, you're still gonna suffer without the ability to take it. I think Inteleon and Goodra are okay examples of decks that are slow, but can take past Giratina. But Arceus doesn't really have that option unless if it's playing Big Charm. And, you know, Giratina has Tool Jammer that it can run. It can run Choice Spell even, or you can run the new supporter, which is Lost Vacuum, I believe. Yeah, Lost Vacuum, which just removes a tool card or Stadium and play. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to beat Arceus Inteleon right now, especially because I think the Inteleon engine is falling off with the rise of Roxanne's popularity. When you get hit by Roxanne and you don't have a Drizzle, you have a situation, it's rough. Especially if you need that Drizzle to grab Sharon's care, for example, after you just got hit. It's not a fun time, to put it bluntly. I have an explicit tier for Urshifus, because somehow I don't think people played enough Urshifu last format, and haven't realized that this card is extremely dumb. Perhaps at the start of the Astral Radiance format, I would have said Urshifu's not that great. At least the Rapid Flow versions. But with the introduction of Pogo, you got Radiant Blastoise, who was able to chip away at Manaphy's very quickly with Scoop Nuts and Trading Courts and the cards like that. And you can find a way to get Yoga Loops onto Metacham, for example. But you've also got the one that, like the Cheryl version that ran the Fighting Energies, and just had a solid core of cards that took second place in the senior division at World. I forgot the player's name, but, you know, shouts to them for proving that Urshifu still works. The deck has a lot of HP, it gets the Cheryl, it deals with Arceus pretty well. So I think Urshifu is, despite Manaphy's high popularity due to being able to charge up Radiant Greninja Palkia, I think Urshifu is still very, very good in this format, in that people really need to be playing on it. Without this Urshifu tier, I believe Urshifu is around up here. Maybe in front of Goodra, but I'm not sure. Goodra's probably the best slept on deck that will be in the next format. I think enough people will play Goodra, but I don't think people will be like, oh yeah, you know, Goodra, you know, the best deck coming out of the format. Most people's eyes will probably be on Giratina and this Lost Bullet deck, and then these two will probably be the like second and third most popular, or like third and fourth most popular decks out of the set. But Goodra's really strong. Simply put, a lot of decks just don't have the tools to break past it. You know, as I was talking about, 280 is a very special number, but Goodra is one of the few Pokemon that just simply doesn't care. It has, I guess I should bring up Goodra since we're talking about it. Yeah, Goodra does 200 damage and they take 80 less. And then because we are using the benefits of the Lost Zone engine as we see here in our handy dandy tier maker, we have access to Fantina as well. That's sort of what I was talking about with Aerodactyl, where you have defensive tools built into your kit. You know, you have Path to the Peak, and you can rush to Fantina, and you can just like try to Fantina your way to victory. Goodra is the same thing, except Goodra is like really built on survival. If we're going back to Goodra, you also have a wonderful V-Star power that just fully heals it. So yeah, I think decks that are able to take more than 1 or 2 hits in this format are phenomenal. Basically, the name of the game is Oko or 2-hit KO everything. If you're 2-hit KOing stuff, that means you have to bulk the survive phase. That's generally how the current metagame works, but Goodra's strong enough where it can take 2 to 3 hits at a time, and there are still some issues. You can run the big Paracel, but Giratina can sometimes run Tool Jammer or the Lost Vacuum to get past it. I think Goodra is a deck that can be taken extremely far, and if people sleep on this deck, then people are going to suffer the consequences of Goodra ruining their day. We got all the Palkias up here. I think all the Palkias are pretty phenomenal. Let's just start with the regular Palkia that we all know and love, or hate, one of the two. Basically, you've got a really, really strong array of tools at your disposal. You hit a ton of damage, so it's very easy for you to find a KO against a V if you're going first. That's already a good sign. You've got the V factor where you can just tilt the fuck out of your opponent by killing their V going first. You have the Shady Dealings engine, which allows you to find explicit tech cards for your matchups. You grab cards like... And then we got damage amplifiers in the deck that people started running mostly as of late, with cards like Leon for an extra plus 30, got Choice Belt for an extra plus 30. People were running that one before. There's a little bit of Zigzagoon, which is another 10 ping. People are running Quick Shooting as well, and then Echoing Horns that also increase the damage even more. So yeah, more Palkias have started running more damage, and that's really what's helped them overcome that hurdle. Where before they were winning because they're fast, and sometimes Radiant Greninja could punish someone that they get Man Feasted up. But now it's like Palkia's finding these Okos, and it's extremely quick. And then we got the 2 sub-versions of Palkia that I think are very strong. The Caravax V-Max is very strong against all the tanky decks that want to try and outwall the 280 benchmark threshold, right? Kira is a lot of work, since we're finally on the, talking about Kira again, bring it up. You have the Side Swirl ability that allows you to attach a Water Energy if you discard the top card of your deck, and it is Water Energy, so you just use cards like a Ringaroo to set it up, maybe a one of Switching Cups, and this allows you to blow past decks very quickly. On top of that, you have Star Portal, which is going to guarantee to give you that last bit of burst you need to break past most of the decks. In terms of its damage, it does 120 plus 150 most of the time, which is, like I said, it's just pretty strong. It does 270. It's about that Mewtwo threshold, but you also got like I said, Choice Belts to increase that damage, or Star Portal, and more Ice Worlds. Deck is going to be high effort, high reward. It's going to help in those matchups where people are trying to use the VMAXs to tank a few hits. And then Palkia Ice Rare is still very well positioned against everything else. You basically choose if you're going to run the alternate attacker, whether you want to trash the V-Stars even more, or if you want to take on the V-Maxes up ahead of you. JP seems to really like Kirin, and they only run a 1-1 line of Palkia for mostly what I've seen, so, take that as far as you want. And then finally, we got what I would probably consider the best deck in the format, which is the deck that won Worlds. I was saying this beforehand, but the reason why I was saying that is because I saw the metagame in a triangle between... let's just move these decks out here real quick. I saw the metagame in a triangle between these 3. Palkia beat Arcanteleon, Arcanteleon beat Arcpika, and then Arcpika beat Palkia, right? But basically, because all the Arceus and Teleon players took Dunsparce out of their deck, and few people that are playing Arcpika and Decidueye in their deck, they were able to basically win the 2 most important matchups in the game, and just win the triangle outright. And I wasn't exactly expecting Decidueye to come back, But my reasoning for that originally was, oh, well, Palkia is going to be the most popular deck, so, you just play the one that wins that triangle. And it worked. Things that come out in this metagame that change for it, let me fix this real quick. You gotta look at the top decks in the format. Arc Pika isn't really affected by any of the techs that are coming out. Between like Tool Jammers and Empoleon V's, just stuff like that. Like Arceus Pika is very like unshaken by all of that. And Giratina is strong. Like if Giratina like attacks an Arceus V-Star and then uses its ability on a flying Pikachu, it could be rough, and I'm not going to deny that. But I still think the deck is very well positioned. Possibly you find a way to help get around the Giratina matchup, because the Giratina matchup is going to be your hardest up-and-coming matchup. Like I said, I still think Palkia is going to be the best deck in the format. Giratina is strong, but it's not like, it's not like BDIF strong. It's just causing metagame shifts to play around it. And Arc Pika pretty much only has Big Parasol to play around it, so, that's my thoughts on the current metagame, or the future metagame, I suppose. I think that the metagame is diverse, and there's still a lot of things to explore. I know for a fact there's a few decks on here that people are asking, oh, why didn't you bring this up, or whatever. And, I think the Lost engine is a really good engine. It's a lot of fun to use, and it plays extremely differently from both the Barrel engines and the Inteleon engines that I think make it quite fun. But with that said, this video is like 50 minutes long, so I'm gonna leave you guys and have your peace. So I'll catch you guys until next time. Peace.